My brother stood at a podium at our father's funeral and talked for 12 minutes about love, sacrifice, and family. He cried in all the right places. People came up to him afterward and said he was a good man. They said our father would have been proud. I sat in the third row behind two cousins I barely recognized, holding a program with my name spelled wrong, and I said nothing. I had not been asked to speak. I had not been told about the funeral arrangements. I had found out about the service the night before through a text from my aunt, who assumed I already knew. My brother had planned every detail of that day and deliberately left me out of all of it. And what he did not know, what no one in that room knew, was that 2 days earlier I had found a document that changed everything. A document that proved he had been planning this moment, not for weeks, not for months, but for nearly 3 years. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. What is the one thing a person does that you can never come back from? Not an argument, not a bad season, not even a mistake made in anger. What is the thing someone does that proves they saw you clearly, understood how much they would hurt you, and chose to do it anyway? Because what my brother did to me was not a mistake, it was a plan. So stay right here because I need you to hear all of it, and I need you to tell me in the comments whether what I did at the end was right or whether I should have given him one more chance. The way this story ends still surprises me, and I was there. My name is Maya, and I am going to tell you the most painful and the most clarifying story of my life. I want to start by telling you who I was before all of this happened because I think it matters. I was the kind of person who believed that family was the safest place in the world. I believed that the people who shared your blood, your childhood, your dinner table, those people would never truly turn on you. They might disappoint you, they might say something wrong, they might pull away for a while, but destroy you, deliberately, patiently, quietly. I did not believe that was possible. I was wrong. My brother's name is Daniel. He is 4 years older than me. Growing up, Daniel was the one our parents worried about. He was not a bad person, but he was careless with money, with time, with other people's feelings. He dropped out of college after one semester. He started businesses that failed quickly. He borrowed money and forgot to pay it back. He told people what they wanted to hear and then disappeared before the bill arrived. But he was funny, he was charming. He could walk into a room and within 10 minutes, everyone in it felt like they had known him their whole life. Our mother adored him, our father made excuses for him, and I covered for him because I loved him and because I thought that was what loyalty looked like. I was wrong about that too. Our father's name was Robert. He worked for 31 years in civil engineering. He was not a wealthy man in the way people usually mean that word, but he had built something steady and real over the course of his life. A house, savings, a small rental property that he had purchased in his 50s and paid off completely. He was meticulous about his finances. He kept paper records of everything. He had a filing cabinet in his home office that I used to sit next to as a little girl while he worked, because I liked the sound of him shuffling papers. He told me once, when I was maybe 9 years old, that keeping good records was how a person told the truth about their own life. I never forgot that. When my father was diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia at the age of 68, our family shifted. Not all at once. Slowly, the way big changes usually happen. At first, it was small things. He forgot an appointment, repeated a story he had told 10 minutes earlier, lost his keys, and found them in the freezer. Then it became something harder to explain away. He would look at me sometimes, and I could see him searching, just slightly, for the right word for who I was, though he always found it. He never lost my name. But the disease was there, and it was moving, and everyone in the family felt it. Daniel moved back to our hometown. He said it was to help. He said he wanted to be there for Dad to take some of the pressure off me. I was the one who had been managing our father's doctor appointments, his prescriptions, his bills. I had driven 40 minutes each way 3 times a week for over a year. I had given up a promotion at work because the new role would have required travel. I had done all of this without being asked because he was my father and because that is what you do. When Daniel came back and said he wanted to help, I felt something in my chest loosen. I thought, this is it. He is finally stepping up. We are going to do this together. I should have paid more attention to what Daniel actually did versus what he said he was going to do. He moved into our father's house. He said it made more sense for him to be there full-time rather than driving back and forth. I agreed. I thought it was practical. I thought it was generous. What I did not think about, what I was too trusting to think about, was that living in the house meant Daniel had access to everything: the filing cabinet, the mail, the documents, the relationships. He started driving our father to his appointments. He started answering the phone when the doctor called. He became the face of our father's care, and I slowly, without realizing it, was being moved to the outside edge. The first time I noticed something was off, I told myself I was being paranoid. I had stopped by one afternoon without calling ahead, which I used to do all the time, and when I walked into the kitchen, Daniel and my father were sitting across from a man I did not recognize. There were papers on the table. When I walked in, Daniel stood up faster than he needed to and said in a completely normal voice that they were just going over some insurance stuff. The man gathered the papers quickly. My father smiled at me and asked if I wanted coffee. The man left within 5 minutes, and Daniel changed the subject so smoothly that I almost did not notice he had done it. I went home that night and told myself it was nothing. Insurance paperwork was real and normal. My father had a lot of accounts. It made sense that someone would come to the house. I had no reason to be suspicious. I was just tired, I told myself. I was carrying a lot. I was reading into things. I want to pause here and tell you something that I now understand very clearly. When a person who loves you is quietly doing something wrong, your gut knows before your mind does. Your gut sends you the message, and your mind, trying to protect the relationship, translates it into something smaller and safer. Paranoid, overreacting, tired, that is what I did for months. I translated the signal into something I could dismiss. The second time I noticed something was at Christmas. We had a family dinner, me, Daniel, our father, and our Aunt Patricia, who is our father's sister. After dinner, Aunt Patricia pulled me aside in the hallway and said in a very quiet voice that she hoped everything was being handled fairly. I asked her what she meant. She looked uncomfortable. She said Daniel had mentioned to her that our father had made some updates to his estate plan and that she just wanted to make sure I was aware. I said I was. I went home and I could not sleep. The next morning, I called our father directly. I asked him as gently as I could whether he had made any changes to his will. He was having a good day. His thinking was clear. He said no, not that he could recall. He said his will was the same as it had always been, split evenly between Daniel and me, with the house going to both of us jointly. He said Daniel had asked him about it a few months back, but that he had told him nothing was changing. I thanked him. I hung up. I held the phone in my lap for a long time. I called a lawyer that week, not to do anything yet, just to understand my options, just to know what was possible. The lawyer asked me a few questions about my father's diagnosis, his level of cognitive function, whether he had a power of attorney in place. He did have a power of attorney. Daniel was on it. The lawyer told me that this was something to watch. He told me that changes made to estate documents when a person has a dementia diagnosis can sometimes be challenged later, depending on when the changes were made and whether the person had capacity at the time. He gave me the name of an elder law specialist and told me to come back if I found anything concrete. I want you to understand that at this point, I still had no proof of anything. I was working on instinct and a Christmas conversation with my aunt. I still loved my brother. I still believed somewhere underneath all of it that I might be wrong. I was not wrong. My father had a hospitalization in February. A minor stroke, caught early, treated well, but it meant 3 days in the hospital and then a week in a short-term rehab facility. During that time, I was at the hospital every day. Daniel came the first day, and then I did not see him again for 4 days. When I asked him where he had been, he said he had been handling things at the house, making sure the pipes did not freeze, checking the mail, paying a bill that was due. Normal things. Responsible things. I thanked him. 2 days after my father came home from rehab, I stopped by the house to bring groceries. My father was resting. I went into the kitchen to put things away, and on the counter next to a stack of envelopes, I saw a letter from an attorney's office I did not recognize. It was addressed to my father, but it had already been opened. I should not have read it, I know that, but I read it. It was a confirmation letter. It confirmed that a new will had been signed and notarized. It confirmed that the signing had taken place 6 weeks earlier, during a period when my father had been having some of his harder days when he repeated himself more, when his thinking was slower. The letter thanked my father for coming in and wished him well. My father had not driven himself anywhere in 4 months. I stood in that kitchen for a very long time. I put the letter back exactly where I found it. I put away the groceries. I kissed my father on the forehead while he slept. I walked to my car. I sat there. And then I drove directly to the elder law attorney's office and I asked for an emergency appointment and I got one. That appointment changed everything. The attorney's name was Sandra Chen. She was calm, thorough, and direct. She asked me to describe what I had seen and heard over the past several months. She asked me about my father's medical history, his diagnosis, his level of functioning during different periods. She asked whether I had any documentation, any records, any photos, any texts or emails that might be relevant. I had some. I had been keeping my father's medical notes out of habit because I had been managing his care, and I had a folder on my phone with appointment summaries and prescription records going back 14 months. Sandra looked at everything I showed her, and then she looked at me and said that what I was describing was a pattern she had seen before. She said we needed to act carefully and we needed to act soon. She explained several things to me. She explained that if a person lacks what is legally called testamentary capacity, meaning a clear enough mind to understand what they own, who their heirs are, and what they are signing, then documents signed during that period can potentially be challenged. She explained that the timing of the new will, 6 weeks before his hospitalization, during a period when his condition had been visibly worsening, was significant. She explained that if my brother had brought my father to that attorney's office knowing that my father's capacity was diminished, that was not just an ethical violation. Depending on the circumstances, it could rise to the level of undue influence or financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. She told me to gather everything, every record, every prescription, every doctor's note, every text message. She told me not to confront my brother yet. She told me to be patient and strategic. I want to tell you that being patient and strategic while looking at your brother across the dinner table is one of the hardest things I have ever done. Over the next 6 weeks, I became very quiet and very organized. I requested copies of my father's medical records going back 2 years. I contacted his primary care physician and gently, carefully explained that I had concerns about decisions made during specific periods and asked whether the doctor had documented my father's cognitive state during those months. The doctor could not share everything with me directly, but she indicated that she had concerns of her own that she had documented and that those records would be available through proper legal channels. I went back to the house, and while Daniel was out, I sat with my father during one of his clearer afternoons and I asked him very gently whether he remembered going to a lawyer's office a couple of months back. He thought about it. He said he remembered going somewhere with Daniel, but he was not sure what it was for. He said Daniel had told him it was routine paperwork. He said he had signed some things, but he had not read them carefully because Daniel said it was fine. He smiled at me and changed the subject to something on the television. My father did not know he had signed a new will. He did not know what was in it. He trusted his son. I went back to Sandra that same evening with my notes from that conversation. She told me to write it down exactly as I remembered it with the date and time and to save it. She said we were building a picture. She said the picture was becoming very clear. I need to tell you what was in the new will, because this is where the scale of what Daniel had done became impossible to minimize. Under our father's original will, the estate was divided evenly, 50% to Daniel, 50% to me. The rental property, the savings accounts, the investments, the house, everything split down the middle. Under the new will, the one signed 6 weeks before my father's hospitalization, Daniel received everything: the house, the rental property, the savings, the investments, every account, every asset, every piece of property our father had spent 31 years building. I received a single line. It said I would receive the contents of my father's personal bookshelf and any personal photographs I wished to take. His books and his photos, that was my inheritance after a lifetime of being his daughter. Sandra C. confirmed this when she obtained a copy of the new will through legal discovery. She read it to me over the phone in a very steady voice and then asked me if I was okay. I said I was. I was not, but I said I was. Here is what I did not do. I did not call Daniel and scream at him. I did not show up at the house and make a scene. I did not tell our aunts and cousins what I had found. I did not post anything publicly. I did not cry in front of anyone except my best friend Rachel, who sat with me for 3 hours that evening and did not say a single word about what I should do next, just let me talk until I ran out of things to say. That was exactly what I needed. What I did instead was continue to show up. I continued to visit my father. I continued to be kind to Daniel when I saw him. I continued to act like a daughter and a sister because my father deserved that from me regardless of what was happening around him, and because I had been advised not to change my behavior in any way that might alert Daniel that something was coming. My father passed away in late spring. He went quietly in his own bed, which is what he had always said he wanted. I was there. Daniel was there. We held his hands. We did not speak to each other much that day. When he was gone, I stayed for a while and then I went home, and I sat alone in my apartment, and I felt the grief that comes when you lose a parent, which is its own complete and enormous thing that had nothing to do with the legal situation and everything to do with the man who had shuffled papers in a filing cabinet and told me that records were how a person told the truth about their own life. The funeral was 6 days later. I found out about it the night before through my aunt's text. I arrived at the church in a black dress my father had once told me he liked, and I sat in the third row, behind cousins I barely knew, holding a program with my name misspelled, and I listened to my brother talk for 12 minutes about love and sacrifice and family. He cried in all the right places. He told a story about our father teaching him to fish that I had never heard before, and that felt to me like it might not have happened. People went up to him afterward and told him he was a good man. I smiled at everyone who spoke to me. I accepted condolences. I ate a small plate of food at the reception. I did not give a speech. I had not been asked. I left after an hour and a half, and on my way to the car I passed Daniel, who squeezed my arm and said, "We'll talk soon about the estate stuff." He said it the way you say something you have already decided, not a conversation, a notification. I nodded. I said, "Of course." I drove home. Sandra filed the legal challenge to the will 11 days after the funeral. The challenge was based on three things. First, documentation from my father's medical records showing that his cognitive function during the period when the new will was signed had been measurably and significantly lower than his baseline. His doctor had noted in the chart that she had observed increased confusion, reduced capacity for complex decision-making, and that she had specifically flagged concerns about his ability to manage financial decisions independently. That note had been made 8 days before the new will was signed. Second, the account I had written of my conversation with my father, in which he had clearly stated that he did not know what he had signed, did not remember the details of where he had been, and had relied entirely on Daniel's characterization of the paperwork as routine. My handwritten account, dated and signed, supported by the timestamp on the voice memo I had made of part of that conversation, because Sandra had told me gently but clearly that memory is not enough in a courtroom. Third, and this is the proof object that changed everything, a bank transfer receipt. Sandra had subpoenaed my father's financial records as part of the discovery process, and what came back was not just account statements. What came back was a record of a transfer that had taken place 4 months before my father passed away, a transfer of $42,000 from my father's savings account to a personal account registered in Daniel's name. The transfer had been authorized using the power of attorney. It had been processed on a Tuesday morning. My father had no record in any of his personal notes of authorizing this transfer, and when Sandra's investigator reviewed his documented functional capacity for that period, it aligned almost exactly with one of his poorest periods of cognitive performance. $42,000 moved quietly on a Tuesday morning while my father was sitting in his house forgetting things. The attorney who had drafted the new will was also subpoenaed. His records showed that he had met with my father once, briefly, for less than 20 minutes total before the signing. He had no independent capacity assessment, he had N.O. notes indicating that he had verified my father's ability to understand what he was signing beyond a standard checklist. He had taken Daniel's word that everything was in order. That attorney was going to have a very uncomfortable few months ahead of him for reasons entirely separate from our case. Daniel found out about the legal challenge on a Thursday afternoon. Sandra called his attorney and gave the formal notification. By Thursday evening, I had received 14 missed calls from Daniel, 2 from our cousin Marcus, and 1 from a number I did not recognize. I did not answer any of them. I had been advised not to. I sent one text to Daniel. It said, "Please communicate through my attorney going forward. Her contact information is attached." Then I put my phone face down on the table and made myself dinner. I want to tell you what Daniel did next, because it says everything about who he had been all along. He did not admit anything, he did not apologize, he did not reach out through his attorney with a settlement offer, not at first. What he did was he called our Aunt Patricia and told her that I had lost my mind with grief. He told her I was attacking the family over money. He told her that our father had made the decision to update his will himself, that it had been Dad's choice, and that I was too selfish and too dramatic to accept it. He sent messages to cousins we had not spoken to in years. He tried to build a courtroom of family opinion before the real courtroom could convene. I heard about all of this through Aunt Patricia, who called me not to repeat what Daniel said, but to tell me she did not believe him. She said she had seen the way things had shifted after Daniel moved into the house. She said she had noticed my father seemed confused after certain conversations with Daniel and that she had worried about it but had not known what to do. She said she was sorry she had not said something sooner. I told her it was okay. I meant it. She had not caused this. She was also a person who had trusted someone she loved. The legal process took 8 months. I am not going to describe every hearing and every document request because what matters is the shape of it. The shape of it was this: the more that came out, the worse it looked for Daniel. The medical records were damning. The bank transfer was, in Sandra's words, very difficult to explain in a way that holds up. The attorney who drafted the will had, by this point, retained his own counsel and was cooperating fully in exchange for a limited immunity arrangement on his own potential liability. And a witness appeared, a neighbor of my father's named Howard, a retired man who lived 2 houses down, who told Sandra's investigator that he had seen my father leave in Daniel's car on the day the will was signed and that my father had looked, in Howard's words, not quite himself, confused, like he wasn't sure where he was going. Howard had never been asked about this before. No one had thought to ask him. That is the thing about patient, quiet strategy. You look in places that the other side forgot to cover. Daniel's attorney reached out with a settlement offer in month 5. The offer was 40% of the estate, no admission of wrongdoing, a confidentiality agreement on both sides. I turned it down. Sandra had told me that settlements are often the right answer, but that this one was not because of the number, but because of the confidentiality clause. If I signed that, the neighbor, the doctor, the transfer record, all of it would be sealed. And I had decided by that point that the truth deserved to be part of the record. My father deserved that. Month 8 brought a settlement that Daniel's attorney and my attorney both described, in nearly identical language, as the only realistic option remaining. The estate would be divided as the original will had specified 50% to me, 50% to Daniel. The $42,000 would be returned to the estate and factored into Daniel's share. Daniel's attorney negotiated a provision that kept the bank transfer details out of any public filing, but the will challenge and its outcome became part of the public probate record. No confidentiality. The truth, written down in a courthouse document, available to anyone who looked for it. There was no admission of wrongdoing in the final document, but there did not need to be. The document itself was the admission. I want to tell you about the conversation Daniel and I had in the parking lot of Sandra's office on the day we both signed the settlement agreement. It was a Tuesday in January, cold, there was a thin layer of ice on the pavement, and I was careful when I walked. Daniel was standing near his car when I came out. His attorney had already left. He looked at me for a moment and I could not read his face. I had once known his face better than almost anyone else's on earth. He said I didn't mean for it to go this far. And I looked at him. I thought about the 12-minute speech at the funeral. I thought about the Tuesday morning transfer. I thought about my name, misspelled on the program, in a funeral he had organized while pretending I did not exist as a mourning daughter with an equal right to grieve her father in public. I thought about the filing cabinet and the papers and my father's voice saying he thought it was just routine. I said, I know. And then I walked to my car. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. Here is what happened after. Daniel sold his half of the house within the year. I did not buy him out and I did not fight it. I took my half of the proceeds and I bought something smaller and completely my own. I have a home now. My name is on the deed, only mine, and nobody can touch it. The rental property was sold as part of the estate settlement. My half of that went into a retirement account that I had been unable to contribute to during the years I had spent sacrificing career advancement to care for my father. A financial planner I work with now says I am, against all odds, on a reasonable track. My father would have liked that. He believed in reasonable tracks. Aunt Patricia and I have dinner together once a month. She is the only member of that side of the family I still see regularly. The cousins faded. Some of them had believed Daniel's version during the 8 months of legal proceedings, and when the settlement came in, they went quiet rather than acknowledging that they had been wrong. I do not hold it against them too strongly. People believe what is easier to believe, but I do not go out of my way for them either. I heard through Aunt Patricia that Daniel's next business venture failed. I heard that he had to leave the house he had been living in because he could not cover the carrying costs once the estate settlement reduced his available cash. I heard that he had tried to contact me twice through intermediaries, once about 8 months after the settlement, once about 14 months after. The message, both times, was that he wanted to talk, that he was going through a hard time, that family was family. I did not respond to either message. Not out of anger, I want to be very clear about that. I was past anger a long time ago. I did not respond because I had spent a decade of my life translating warning signals into excuses for someone who had been running a calculation about me the entire time. I had been the margin in his plan, the person he counted on to look away, to show up anyway, to be loyal beyond reason. And I had been, right up until the moment I found a letter on a kitchen counter and drove to an attorney's office and asked to understand my options. The version of me who would have responded to those messages and let him back in, she was gone. She had been replaced by someone who kept good records, asked good questions, and understood that some people are only sorry when the cost catches up to them. That is not the same as being sorry. There is one more thing I need to tell you. About 4 months after the settlement, I was going through a box of my father's things that I had packed up from the house. Books mostly, which were my entire legal inheritance under the document Daniel had engineered. I had taken them without comment and brought them home and set them in a corner of my living room and had not opened the box for weeks because I was not ready. When I finally opened it, I found a letter at the bottom of the box. It was in a sealed envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting. The date on the back of the envelope was written in the corner the way he always dated things, out of habit, and the date was from 2 years before he died, before his worst periods, before the diagnosis had progressed to the point where documents could be questioned. I will not tell you everything that was in that letter because some of it belongs only to me, but I will tell you the part that I think about most often. He wrote that he knew Daniel had a generous and complicated heart and that he loved him and that he worried about him. He wrote that he knew I was the one who kept things together quietly without needing to be thanked. He wrote that he hoped I would not let loyalty become something that someone else used to cost me things. He wrote in his careful engineer's handwriting that a person could love their family and still protect themselves, that those two things were not opposites. He had known not everything, but enough. And he had set it down in his own hand and sealed it and put it in a box of books he knew I would eventually open because he understood his children and he understood that I would take the books even if I received nothing else, because I had always loved books and I had always loved him. I sat on my living room floor for a long time after reading that letter. I cried in a way I had not let myself cry since the funeral, not from If only, though the grief was real, but from something that felt like being seen, like being known, like arriving somewhere after a very long walk and realizing you had arrived. My father kept good records. He told the truth about his own life right down to the last letter in the last box. I think about him a lot now, not the version of him that was diminished and confused and dependent, the version who showed up to a filing cabinet on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee and a whole, clear mind. That is the version that is with me. That is the version I carry. My life now is quieter than it used to be. I work a job I like and I come home to a house that is entirely mine. I have a small group of people I trust completely. I am slowly learning to notice warning signals without immediately translating them into something smaller and safer. That is harder than it sounds. 10 years of habit does not leave quickly, but I am working on it. I do not regret any of the choices I made during those 8 months. Not the attorney, not the records I kept, not the conversation with Howard, the neighbor, or the afternoon I sat with my father and let him talk until something clarifying emerged, not the turned down settlement offer with the confidentiality clause, not the parking lot conversation that lasted 45 seconds. I stand behind all of it. And I do not regret the decision not to respond when Daniel sent word that he needed me, because here is the thing about people who plan to use you: they plan for the version of you that keeps showing up. They do not plan for the version of you that stops. The version of me that stopped is the one that has a house, a future, a father's letter, and a clear record. She is doing fine. I want to leave you with something my father wrote in that letter, not an exact quote because those words are mine, but a thought he put there in his careful handwriting. He said that the people who truly love you will not ask you to make yourself smaller to make them comfortable. And that anyone who does ask that, anyone who counts on your silence, your patience, your willingness to look away, that person is not protecting the relationship. They are using it. He was right, he was always careful about being right. That is the whole story, or at least, it is all the story I am ready to tell today. I want to know what you think about the choice I made in that parking lot, the 45-second conversation, the turned back, the decision to simply walk away. Some people would say I should have said more, some would say I should have said nothing at all. And some of you are probably thinking about your own person right now, the one you have been translating warning signals for, the one who counts on you to look away. Tell me in the comments, what is the line for you? What is the thing that once you see it, you cannot unsee? I read every comment. And if this story gave you something, a word to hold on to, a permission to stop explaining yourself to people who already know what they are doing, then share it with someone who needs to hear it today.